This is Chinwe Onyegoro from PocketSuite. You are here for the fully funded Making the Most of Your PocketSuite Capital Financing webinar. We have a lot of really good information to share with you. As we wait for more folks to join, I'll ask you to answer two questions in the chat. One is very easy. What city and state are you joining from? And the second is, what is one thing you'd like to take away from this webinar? One thing to note is that everyone in this webinar is pre-qualified for PocketSuite Capital financing. So you have offers that are ready and waiting in your account. So we're particularly interested in understanding what questions, what concerns you have about PocketSuite Capital, and anything under the sun that might help you think about whether or not PocketSuite Capital is a useful resource for you at this time. So please drop in the chat your city and state, as well as what's one thing you'd like to learn in this webinar tonight. We are recording, so no need to take vigorous notes. We will share on the evening after or afternoon after, we will share this deck that we're going through. We'll also share a recording from tonight's session. So you can review that. And for those that don't join, of course, they'll also get a copy of the recording. So I'm going to take a peek in the chat to see what questions are coming through. Let us know if you can't see or don't have access to the chat. All right, we've got a couple folks from Florida. Welcome, California, Ohio. Fantastic. All right, so we've got lots of variety here. Hello, Sylvia. Good to see you in the chat here. Excited for the conversation we're going to have. I'm going to give it one more minute and then we will get started. Hello, Jassy and Sam. These are some familiar names, so great to see you all here. All right, I am going to get started. My hope is that we'll get through the meat of this presentation within about 30 minutes or so. And then please feel free throughout the conversation to drop questions in the chat. We should be able to answer those questions either through the information captured in the materials, or we have a fantastic resource in Liam, who is a member of the PocketSuite team. He is going to be in the chat monitoring your questions. He's particularly here to answer any technical questions you have about the underlying kind of capital requirements. So if you have any tough zingers, throw them in the chat for Liam, and I'll keep pushing through to make sure we get through all this good stuff. Okay, so just to start, give you a little bit of background on myself. I am Chinwe Onyegoro. I'm one of the co-founders of PocketSuite. So I'm always excited to have these kind of intimate conversations with some of our top pros who are driving our community, who are generating jobs in your communities, and are building really amazing businesses. For those that don't know, PocketSuite has generated about $1 billion in income within our PocketSuite Pro community. So we're really, really proud of the small role that we play in ensuring that your businesses are reaching lots and lots of clients so that you can continue to deliver. My background is I've spent 25 years in the small business financing space. I've done work with most of the major banks, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, as well as the US Small Business Administration and many, many municipalities across the country. And my focus has been on really helping small businesses grow, both in terms of raising financing, but also in terms of putting that financing to work to support their growth plans. So I'm uniquely interested in this topic. I've raised about $150 million in financing for small businesses across the country. And what's exciting about that is I've got a lot of kind of tentacles and experience raising different types of financing. So if you have any questions about, how PocketSuite Capital compares to other forms of financing that you might have access to, feel free to ask those questions as well. We have no pride of authorship. Our goal is to make sure you're getting the resources that you need at this time or in the future. So happy to help you compare and contrast the different options. I am also a bit of a geek when it comes to financing. I get into the weeds, into the numbers, and I co-authored a study with the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago and San Francisco in really defining what it means to be a healthy small business from a financial perspective, and then extending that to what kind of financing should you have access to, depending on where you fall on that health spectrum. And then I am a recovering management consultant. I used to work with McKinsey and Company and the Monitor Group. So that's a bit about my background, and looking forward to sharing a bit about what we're doing in the area of financing with you today. So today we'll talk about PocketSuite Capital. We're not going to actually spend a lot of time on the nuts and bolts of the financing product itself, because there's lots of information about that, and we're happy to answer any specific questions. Where we're going to spend our time today is really talking about how can you put this financing to work, and what are some of the best ways to put it to work in order to support growth. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that depending on where you are in your growth plans and in your overall growth goals. There are a lot of different ways you can put this capital to work to ensure that it's actually bearing fruit. The way in which we're going to look at those opportunities is we're going to identify what are the signals that you should be seeing in your business today that suggest that there's more opportunity. With additional resources, you could put fuel on a fire that's already burning in your organization, and that actually will lead to even more opportunity within your business. So we'll talk about what those signals are for the different opportunities we have seen folks take advantage of PocketSuite Capital. Next, we'll talk about PocketSuite reports. We're really, really proud of the metrics that we make available to businesses on PocketSuite. And we think there are very specific metrics that you have access to your fingertip away to really peel back the kind of the onion to say, is this a signal that there's more opportunity here? So we'll identify what those metrics are. And then we'll leave you with a simple plan, simple action plan for being able to do a bit of investigative work within your own business, within your own PocketSuite account to see what is most interesting. And then we'll have lots of time for Q&A as well. So to start, PocketSuite Capital, it's a very specific type of financing, and I believe one of the more attractive financing options. It's a loan amount that ranges from anywhere from I would say $1,000 all the way up to we've seen as high as $250,000 of financing. What's very, very unique about PocketSuite Capital is it's one flat fee. What does that mean? That means that traditionally, when you look at the kinds of financing that's available to small business, you think about credit cards, which is frankly the number one source of financing that small businesses use, and then secondarily loans. And in both cases, credit cards and loans, you actually have an interest rate that you are basically using to pay back that loan. And so there's really no cap on what the cost of that loan will be to you and your business. The difference with PocketSuite Capital is that it's one flat fee, and that fee does not go up. It does not go up. It's one flat fee for that specific financing amount. So, and we've seen that flat fee be roughly around 10 to 12% interest rate for a business, effective interest rate for a business, which is actually very affordable in this current interest rate environment that we live in. And then you'll see something really interesting called the payment rate. And we don't want you to be confused between the payment rate and the interest rate. The payment rate is really simply a measure of what percentage of your payments processed on PocketSuite, what percentage will go towards repaying your loan. So it's not an interest rate. It really determines how quickly you pay back that loan because that flat fee is the only cost associated with the financing amount that you are awarded or the offer that you are extended. So that's essentially kind of PocketSuite Capital in a nutshell. We don't call it a loan because it doesn't have any of the properties of a loan other than the fact that it's borrowed funds to support your business. It's much more flexible. You pay it back as you generate capital. So there's not a fixed amount per se that you have to pay back. There's a minimum amount, but there isn't a fixed amount that you have to pay back. If you process less, this week or next week, this day or next day, you're able to adjust your payment accordingly, which is great flexibility given the ebbs and flows of running a business and generating that revenue. So that's all I'll say to start about PocketSuite Capital as a financing product, and then we'll sort of peel back the layers as to how this product can be used. I'll just give a shout out to one of our pros who just knew that we were doing this webinar and just wanted to say a few words about her own experience. So, Chastity Criswell is a massage therapist, and she was one of the earliest folks to take advantage of the PocketSuite Capital financing offer. And you'll see here the range of ways in which she is looking to use those funds, some of which are very sort of streamlined in terms of back office operations, making sure she has the inventory, the equipment, the tools that she needs to be able to deliver on the revenues she's generating and support the clients that she's supporting. But you'll see that the vast majority of her focus is on investing in growth. She's investing in marketing to get more clients and repeat clients, right? So there's a dollar for dollar. The hope is there's a dollar for dollar impact in terms of what she's investing in marketing and what she's able to generate in terms of revenue from that marketing. And then finally, continuing education to be able to think about what are additional offers, what are the different products and services that she can offer to her existing client base that will expand, what they are working with her on, their overall spend with her over the life of their relationship. So those are some creative ways that she's using PocketSuite Capital, some of which you'll hear more about in this presentation. So I always like to begin with the end in mind. So these are in our mind, these are the five kind of core ways in which PocketSuite Capital, we would suggest that you consider deploying PocketSuite Capital depending on where your business happens to be. And you might look and say, well, that's very generic. Of course, marketing, inventory, equipment, those are kind of all of the elements of a business. We're going to peel back the layers to talk specifically about what aspect of marketing, what you should be seeing in your business before you make this kind of investment, and how you should hold yourself to account once you've made the investment to ensure that you're getting the return on investment in each one of these domains. So let's kick it off. The first and foremost, marketing. It's the gift that keeps on giving. It's the most sexy part of our business, right? Is getting new clients, exposing new folks to the amazing work that we do, and generating additional sales and income. So our focus, though, is in understanding what aspect of marketing should we be tuning into, and again, how should we be holding ourselves to account? So this is ultimately going to be the structure as to how we talk about these opportunities that we can use PocketSuite Capital to invest in. From left to right, we answer the question, what should you look for in your business? And there are hard metrics that you can find that ultimately validate or suggest this is not the time to be investing in this direction. The second is why it matters. So it's not just the what, it's, why would you do this? What is your theory about what will happen to your business, what the returns will be when you make this investment? And then, some risk factors. What are some things to watch out for to make sure the investment is really paying off? Okay. So starting from left to right, what should you look for on the marketing side? The number one thing we would suggest before you invest in marketing, if that's how you'd like to use PocketSuite Capital or any type of financing, the number one thing you need to know is you need to know your numbers. If you spend $100 on paid ad or on SEO, some kind of organic campaign, if you spend $100, how many dollars do you get back in terms of new clients within 30 days, right? So for every $100 I spend, I get one client, one new client, and they typically, are booking me for, $300 facial or, a $500, mobile detailing package. What are the set of things they're booking you for, and how much are you generally able to make within 30 days? And then within 60 days, and then within 90 days. So that same $100 for every $100 of spend, tracking 30, 60, and 90 days to sort of say, okay, within 3 months, how much more am I making in my business? So before you add additional fuel to the marketing flame, you should be able to look at your metrics within PocketSuite and say, okay, how much did I spend? How much have I been spending on new clients? And for every $100 of my spend, how many new clients did I get? And roughly what on average, what kind of income did I make from those new clients within those time periods? And those numbers are all there. If you're not tracking your marketing spend in PocketSuite, no problem. This is something you can then export, from PocketSuite, your new client numbers in 30, 60, 90 days, and then grab from wherever you're tracking your marketing spend, even if it's a spreadsheet or pen and paper, you can then just compare how much did I spend, how many new clients did I get in PocketSuite, and how much did they spend with me. If you don't have those numbers, it's too soon to use PocketSuite Capital on marketing because you don't have a baseline from which to say, hey, did it work? I spent $1,000 of PocketSuite Capital financing on this. Did it translate to these kinds of numbers or better? So that's the number one thing we would say, take a look at and ensure you have a handle on. And if you have a handle and the story is good, fire away, right? So if the story is for every $100 I spend, I'm generating zero clients, or I'm generating one client, but they're spending maybe $50, over the course of 3 months. That's not an ROI story. You're spending a lot more than you're getting back over a 3 month period. You're not ready yet. Let's fine tune why folks aren't coming down the funnel and what it's going to take to ensure that for any dollars you spend, you're getting that output. So that's, I think, the number one kind of case for marketing. What do I know? How does it look? And then what should I watch out for if I'm going to go this route on marketing? So these are a couple of examples of what you want to be thinking about, what you want to be looking at when you think about, spending on marketing. So we've provided a variety of examples depending on your industry to be able to give you a feel and a flavor for what it should look like for your profession. Okay. And then on the right-hand side, we've shared an example of how you can use PocketSuite metrics to be able to track. If you end up using PocketSuite Capital to invest in marketing, how you should be able to track your campaigns going forward to be able to see what are these campaigns delivering and is it translating relative to the baseline analysis you did before you made that investment. Okay. So I'm going to transition to retail inventory and supplies. This may not apply to all. So if you're not currently, selling retail products and you're just not ready to step into those waters, no problem. But for those that have been thinking about it and maybe haven't had, a set aside of funds to be able to put those dollars in, this may be the time. And certainly for those who are already selling products, but you haven't had, again, that additional resource base to be able to say, let me buy more inventory and then sell more. This may be the time to take a hard look. This math, I think, is very straightforward. If you're already selling products, you can quickly look at your PocketSuite reports to see what your best selling products are. You know what you're spending per unit. You're able to track that within PocketSuite, and you should now be able to see what kind of revenue you're generating from those same products, from those same units. And so the question you're asking yourself is not so much, can I sell it? The question you're asking yourself is, are there a set of products that my clients are asking for me to, asking for recommendations on, asking for referrals on, that they're buying elsewhere that are perfectly within your kind of wheelhouse and scope to be able to offer them in addition to anything else that you're already providing them with? What's the price point for those products? What's the markup, that you can add to it in order to make it worth your while to be able to provide that, product through your business. So that's a very straightforward kind of profit kind of markup exercise. But the starting gate is, for the clients that are already buying from you, is there more that they're looking for, that they've been asking for already, that you can provide them? And then if they're not yet buying from you, is there an opportunity for you to do kind of a survey or reach out to them to say, hey, I'm evaluating, offering some additional kind of add-ons. Here are the brands I'm looking at, or here are the product and items I'm looking at. To what extent are you interested? To what extent would you be interested in, adding this to your package or your membership that you already have with me? So you can get a feel and a flavor for those that would be very interested. You don't want to get stuck with inventory that you cannot, unload. Let's figure out what that demand function is, and then you can move forward. The profit calculation is typically very straightforward. You know what the per unit cost is, and of course, the more inventory you buy, typically you're able to negotiate a lower per unit cost with the wholesaler. Again, you don't want to jump out too far in front of the demand, so you start small and see kind of how quickly that inventory is, you're able to unload it at the right price point, and then you can kind of make bigger investments as you go. This is the number one use that we've seen beauty professionals really lean into when they're taking advantage of PocketSuite Capital. Typically, they are the advisor to their clients on, skincare regimes, health and wellness regimes. And so they're in a really good position to say, these are the brands I really trust, the brands I really like. And we actually have quite a few beauty and health and wellness professionals that actually make their own products and are able to use this to really kind of buy those raw goods, make those products, and of course the profit opportunity there is even greater. So here are some additional examples of, how you might think about retail inventory, how you might think about using PocketSuite Capital to get a jump on buying those products and selling those products to an existing base of clients. What I wouldn't do is to say, hey, what I really need is new clients, and now I'm going to add products on top of just trying to get more new clients through the door. You typically want to test these things, with experiments one at a time to see what's working, what's not working. If new clients is what you're focused on, I think that marketing focus is really the right way to focus in terms of your PocketSuite Capital financing. If it's really, I've got a really great base of clients, they want more from me. Retail products may be an interesting place to go and to think about. And again, we've got really great reports to be able to track your volume sales, your sales by client, and to be able to get a feel for what times of year folks are even purchasing these products from you the most. All right, so we'll transition, and as you can see, we're going from, marketing, which I would say is, the lightest lift, because you can do organic, social marketing, you can do paid marketing, to products, which is inventory. Now you're having to make an investment well in advance of seeing the returns from that investment, and you've got to manage it really closely to manage your margin. To equipment, right? So this is really a pretty significant investment. And you really have to understand what your returns are going to be from these kinds of investments before you make it, because that's a huge fixed cost that ultimately adds to your cost base, reduces your margin in the short term if you're not able to generate that revenue over the medium term to be able to show the ROI. It becomes tricky. So equipment is one that has to be deeply considered. With equipment, the question you're asking yourself is, am I oversubscribed? right? You're basically saying, gosh, I run a Pilates, studio, and I don't have enough reformers, right, to be able to serve all the customers that actually want to do classes with me, to serve all the customers that are knocking on my door at my peak times, or at choice times. That's when you're asking yourself the question, is it better to turn away those extra customers or to just buy some more equipment that I can accommodate in my existing facility to be able to take on more customers and still have a comfortable, environment and deliver a great experience. So you really are going to want to see outsized demand for your existing service base that you currently cannot support. You are turning folks away. You have wait lists, and folks are not able to get off the wait list in many cases, and that's potential revenue that you are turning away. That's when you start asking yourself the question, do I need another, do I need to rent a bigger, space? Do I need to add an additional massage room to be able to do more couples massages and so on and so forth? That's when you start to dig into those numbers. And as you think about, what's it going to take, you really do want to do some hard math around, how many folks would I need to, how many more folks would I need to see per day or per week to be able to defray the cost of this investment over what period of time? And if you can do that math and the math makes sense, right? If you typically see 10 to 20 clients a week and it's like, all I need to do is see, 15 to 25 clients a week and I have more than paid back for this equipment and I'm turning 10 folks a week away, every week, that's a no-brainer. You've already done the math. Even if 50% of the folks you turn away now come in and now take advantage of this new equipment you've rented, you're in the money. And so that's again, the basic math you're doing. And the question you might ask yourself is, well, how do I track that? How do I know? We have analytics within PocketSuite that can tell you how many folks are coming to your booking site, how many folks are checking out. If you have a huge drop off in terms of checkout for classes and for some of your most popular services during your most popular times, you know that there's latent demand there that you're not fulfilling. We have a wait list function that allows you to track in hard terms how many folks wanted that time and didn't get it. You can create your own kind of wait list that basically says, hey, if you're interested in these times or these days or what have you, put your name on the list. That will give you a sense of how many people are waiting for those slots, and that's when you can start doing the math around how many more folks can I serve to be able to support making this kind of investment. It may sound a bit overwhelming. Gosh, I have to do all this math just to buy a piece of equipment. You don't have to do it, but the question is, how do you define success in making that investment without doing it? And so that's really where we can get into the exercise of let's do the math, and it can be on the back of a napkin, but you want to use real, PocketSuite data to ensure you're not, blue skying the numbers. So here again are some examples of how folks are using PocketSuite Capital to invest in equipment and then holding themselves to account on how many more clients am I serving now that I have this additional equipment. Now, notice I didn't mention anything about replacing equipment, right? The replace equipment, decision is a very different equation, and it's a harder equation to make the case for. Unless that equipment is fundamentally broken and not working, or is, hurting your reputation because it's really not delivering at the quality that you need, and you're losing customers over it. The replace equipment calculation is a very different calculation, and it's a harder one to make the return on investment, to hit the return on investment threshold calculation on. You want to start with the new equipment because you have excess demand, not the replace existing equipment, because ultimately it becomes very hard to see how many more clients would I get, how much more would folks pay if I bought this new equipment. That's a harder one to underwrite. All right. And then again, we do have really great reports to the extent you're using our resources feature where you're able to track individually the equipment that is needed to deliver your services and how much they're being utilized. If you're in that consistently 80% and over utilization, you're probably bumping up against latent demand that you're not able to serve. That's it. But if you're in the 30 to 40% utilization on the equipment, equipment may not be the place to start for PocketSuite Capital. All right, we're almost there. Team. So this is staff. Again, we're getting progressively more intense in terms of the commitment you're making when you invest in this direction, right? Equipment is one thing, an additional team member is a whole nother level, right? So this is a similar story, though, in terms of the equation. The good news is that doesn't necessarily have to start off with an FTE or a part-time person. It could start off with a contractor who maybe has, just is looking for supplemental income or, looking to have to fill a few hours or during nights and weekends. So you don't have to make the full commitment. But no matter what level of commitment it is, you still have to ask yourself the question, is there additional demands that I'm turning away or that I'm not even, opening up because, I'm not even opening up the doors on that this additional person would allow me to open up the doors on, right? So if folks are constantly reaching out to you, even though you have your fabulous booking site set up and they're, and you've made your availability plain, if they're constantly reaching out saying, hey, can you squeeze me in on Saturday or Sunday, or is there any way you can fit me in on these days? And you clearly have some peak demand times and your availability is fully booked. What we found is PocketSuite pros who are fully booked, they're fully booked for months out, right? And so folks know that if you don't get on the calendar quickly, you're just not going to get those peak times. And if that's your story, bravo, very impressive because you've got a really loyal client base that really wants in on your calendar. But that might suggest, gosh, if I could open up more peak time with someone I really respect that could come in, I can train them, or they're already trained, they're awesome, they're an expert. I can just open up their time for peak. That then is a conversation you might want to have about adding an additional team member. And what does that really mean? Are you using PocketSuite Capital just to pay the team member? What you're using PocketSuite Capital to do is to float that team member for maybe a 3-month period to ensure that if the demand doesn't come in as quickly as you think it's going to, you can supplement the whatever the contract is or the salary is that you need to pay them to ensure they're still motivated and available to do that work. Because it may take some ramp up time to get people comfortable with the fact that, oh my gosh, you're available this weekend. Who knew, right? Because you've trained them to know that they've got to book you 3 months in advance. So they're probably already, in despair that they can't get you. So you're now going to have to send those promotions out to say, hey, we've got Saturday and Sunday pop-up available now. We've got additional time on the books, and it may take some time to get them on the calendar. Meanwhile, that person is available and their slots may not be totally full during that time, but you want to make sure they're a captive audience to be able to really build that piece of your business out. That's what we're talking about in terms of team. What we're not necessarily talking about is, hiring a virtual assistant or hiring, additional kind of back office assistant. You might say, gosh, a back office assistant could free up my time and then I could use that time to do more work. Definitely. However, for that first PocketSuite Capital investment, you're not necessarily, it's going to be harder to hit that return on investment threshold with a back office resource versus someone who is directly delivering to clients, where you're generating dollar for dollar in terms of revenue that you invest in them. You're generating additional revenue based on the services they're delivering to those clients that you can't serve because you're overbooked. So that's what we would suggest. We're not saying don't hire a VA, don't hire an assistant. We're saying that's not the ideal use for the PocketSuite Capital loan, because remember, there is a cost to that financing. So you want to make sure that the returns you're getting on using that financing far exceed the cost associated with paying for, to borrow those funds. Okay. Again, some very straightforward examples in terms of how different types of businesses are using this capital to ensure that they're bringing on team members who are immediately generating revenue for them. And this is revenue and demand that was already behind the curtain that you're now able to kind of open the door on. And utilization rates are, again, a great place to look is how far in advance am I booked? And what are those peak time dates and times, weekends, times of month, times of year that I'm overbooked? maybe I can block out additional time and additional availability for an additional resource for those times to start. And then we can build a book of business around, them that will allow them to be with you full time. And then finally, this is the absolute biggest investment that a business owner, can make is in a space in a facility. No matter how large or small, it's a commitment. Whether it's a short-term month-to-month lease or it's a longer-term lease, this is the single biggest commitment, not one for the faint of heart. So whether you have a facility now or not, whether you're in a salon suite or a shared space or you're working from home, this is again not one we would suggest going, charging forward on with PocketSuite Capital unless the signals are firing at all levels. And what I would say is, the number one signal is that literally you have both, your calendar is overbooked, with clients that you're serving, and the current space that you are using is insufficient to be able to serve anymore. Right. And so the only way I can serve more clients that are knocking on my door asking for me, to take them on is if I get a bigger space. And that's where you already have that latent demand when you expand and have your grand opening, whether it's, hey, I'm moving from my home to a salon suite, or I'm actually renting space at a local kennel, to be able to board more dogs, or, I'm actually getting a mobile grooming, truck, and I'm going to be making stops in these geographies. Before you do that, you have a long list of folks who have attempted to work with you at different periods of time, and you've had to say, I'm not available. Even if you were able to accommodate them at a different time, it still gives you a sense that you're bursting at the seams in terms of your physical space, and you may need to expand. We would definitely suggest against long-term leases if you're, thinking about this, unless you already have a long-term lease and you're simply expanding the square footage. But if you're going from, home-based or, mobile to a space, you're going to want to keep the reins tight on the lease term. One, because you just don't know, when you build it, will they come? And then two, you don't know how long that space, the size and the build out is going to suit you. And so you don't want to be tied in for too long. So that is the other and final example that we will give on how you can use PocketSuite Capital in order to invest in space. Okay. And this is the one, again, we're being a bit light-footed on this one because this is the one where this is a major fixed cost. It immediately hits your bottom line. It's a legal commitment that with or without the clients, with or without the revenue, those dollars need to be paid in addition to the PocketSuite Capital financing costs. So you don't want to be stacking those costs up unless you have that revenue ready to go, ready to go. Okay. And so always renting that space from, a local kennel or from a salon suite or someone else where there's some flexibility if you need to turn it up or turn it down is the best route to start. All right. So I will just recap a few things here, which is the number one thing that you really want to know before you take any kind of financing is you want to know the numbers. You want to know the numbers on things that are happening in your business today that suggest that you are bursting at the seams, meaning for every $100 I spend, I get 5 new clients within 90 days, and they're spending $600 with me over that period. That's a 6x, right? That's a 6x conversion on your $100 spend. That suggests you are the best kept secret and you need to start spending some funds in your local market at minimum to begin to spread the good word about you and your services. Same thing when you think about retail products. People are always asking me this and that, making recommendations. I need to now explore retail and. So think about those investments. Think about it from the standpoint of what opportunities are sitting on the table that I continue to hear over and over again. I continue to see in my numbers that I haven't been able to pour fuel on. This is the time. Okay, so the one kind of pitch that we will give you is we know that this is tough. You're already running a business, it's all you can do to to manage the calendar and make sure that every client feels super special. You deliver, over deliver for your clients, and now we're asking you to peel back the numbers and start looking at the numbers in a new way to figure out where the growth opportunities are. We get that that's a lot. We are here. Our team is here. We have an expansion team that's solely focused on looking at your numbers, on helping you identify those areas based on what the metrics are showing that are ripe for expansion, where then you can take a hard look as to whether or not the return possibilities are strong enough for you to take advantage of financing to be able to pursue them. So we're happy to help you look at those reports, dig into them, think about what those opportunities are, and then prioritize those opportunities. So if that's interesting to you, take a look at that QR code, and take a look at our account health review. That's where we will support you in coming up with an opportunity analysis that you might want to take advantage of. And then this is the set of questions that you're going to be kind of asking yourself as you're thinking about where to spend, where to invest. Okay, and we've talked a lot about that. And then this is the action plan that we've promised. Write down, you can't, Rome wasn't built in a day. Write down one or two things that you have a hunch on, because generally you already know before you look at the numbers, the things that, you see bubbling up that you haven't been able to take all the way. And then take a look at the numbers with those two things in mind and say, does it prove out? Are the numbers consistently showing? And not just one week, but consistently week after week, month after month, I'm still seeing this spiking, or I'm still seeing utilization 80% or more on these days or during these weeks. Let me take a harder look and see what's needed here to grow. And then think about what you want to tackle first and prioritize that. The good news is what is often the hard part, which is getting the resources to be able to now pursue these opportunities. That's already taken care of. You've got an offer sitting in your account. So now it's like, what do I do with it? Because you don't want to take the financing if you don't have a need today. You want to take it once you really have conviction about what comes next. Okay. All right, I promised, 30 minutes, and we're at 42 minutes. So I apologize for that. I get excited about this topic. So I'm going to take a peek in the chat to see what questions are bubbling up from folks. And happy to tackle any that we have not yet tackled. Absolutely, we will be sharing the presentation, Erica, after this conversation. Great. I like to hear what people are thinking about it. Okay. Any other questions that folks have at this time, or concerns you have about PocketSuite Capital or any kind of financing that you might be considering for your business?
So, Chinwei, we have one of our pros, Erica, who
Yes.
has already participated in the PocketSuite Capital program. And so she's
Wonderful.
wanting to share, Erica, if you're still on the line, some of her experiences and goals.
That would be wonderful. Let
Let
me
me see if I can
see.
allow her to talk. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Uh, Erica, can you unmute?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thanks so much for joining. We're thrilled that you're here. Tell your story.
So I was really excited to see the opportunity. Other opportunities have shown up in my email about business funding, but I was always really skeptical about those because I was thinking they probably send those email messages to everybody who starts a business. And so I would not consider doing funding that way. But when I saw it from PocketSuite, because it was a company I was already doing business with and they already knew how my business was running, I felt more comfortable taking advantage of the opportunity that way. I also did the math. I thought, okay, I understood how much of a percentage would go from each transaction that I ran. And so I was like, okay, if I had that reduction, how would I feel for still providing that service? So that was one of the things that I considered before applying for the opportunity. But it was very easy. Um, once I received the offer and the approval, the money was deposited in the account within a couple of days. So that was super easy. And it really gave me an opportunity to expand my business space. So I had moved to another location, but my room was smaller.
Mhm.
And so I couldn't have a specific area for each type of service that I provided because I'm a licensed esthetician, but I'm also a licensed master barber.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
because of the timing of this funding opportunity, I was able to get a larger space. So now I have a room that each service has a particular area. So I don't have to try to change the setup of the room between clients. For me, that was a game changer because I noticed that I wasn't offering other services because I didn't want to have to reset my room each time.
I get
So with
it.
this opportunity, I was able to get into a larger room, so now each service has its own dedicated area so that I can schedule people back to back without having to do a lot of manual work in between. So it was perfect timing for me. It was an easy process. And then, as you pointed out before, the amount of money that I pay varies based on the week. So if I have a slower week, then I don't feel like I am losing,
Right,
or I don't feel a lot of stress because the payment is taken out from each transaction.
right. Wow, Erica, fantastic. You went right to the heart of the matter. You ran the numbers. You wanted to get comfortable with, for every dollar that I make, how much are you taking out and am I comfortable with that? That's priority one, right? Because you have an existing base of expenses, an existing base of commitments that you still have to, address with the payment, experience and transactions that you have. So on top of that, what more can you take on? And then you had the opportunity to expand in your facility. And you went right to the heaviest investment and have had a success story around it. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Erica, for sharing your experience.
You're welcome.
Anyone else either have an experience or considering options for financing for your business?
Chinwe, are you able to see the Q&A tab? We have a couple
I'm
questions
not.
there
Let me take a
that we
look
can
there. Oh,
answer.
there we go. Let me jump into the Q&A here. Great. Okay, so it looks like given this flat rate and payback convenience, would you advocate for using this as a means to consolidate business debt? I would not. I really appreciate you asking that question. I would not use this as a way to consolidate that debt. Why is that? Well, twofold. One is, your consolidation of debt doesn't change the equation for you in terms of the core business, your financing. What it does is it takes some debt off the table, but then it puts in a new source of debt. And the best use of this money is for growth because when you grow, you're able to pay off that existing debt faster, but you're also able to pay off this debt. You want to use it for growth because if you don't necessarily have a growth engine around using it may not increase the speed with which you actually pay down the PocketSuite Capital money that you use to sunset the other money. So you've kind of robbed Peter to pay Paul, and now you've got a new pool of debt that you still have to figure out a way to pay down. So you're able to keep as much as your money as possible. So I wouldn't use it that way. Now you might argue, well, the financing and interest on this other debt that I have is 20%, and this is much more flexible. So that will at least reduce the amount you're paying out day one. That is a valid argument. So what I'm saying is consolidating that debt is not the number one use for the funds, but I know there is a use case for saying if I'm paying 22% on money and I'm getting 12% money, I want to reduce the 10 percentage point spread on the debt I have. I recognize that it's not the first place we'd look because I'm sure if we did an account health review, we'd find some low hanging fruit to be able to help you make more money that would actually generate even more money than the 22% that you're paying now. And that becomes a gateway to getting more financing offers. So one thing I didn't mention is once you take advantage of a financing offer and pay it back, you actually are eligible for additional financing. So it doesn't stop there. Now, if you use this financing to pay back, this consolidated debt, It doesn't accelerate your ability to pay back the financing you get, in which case there's no additional financing that you're going to be able to have access to until you pay back that first financing. So let's find a growth engine that allows you to pay back PocketSuite Capital quickly and then open up more opportunities for financing that maybe could be used to pay down consolidated debt over time. Okay. So that's a tough one. That my immediate reaction is, let's look under some other rocks first and see if there are better opportunities for the capital. And if we don't find any, then let's revisit the consolidation option. Do you feel investing in creating my own skincare line is a great idea? You're a clinical esthetician. Now, that's a great question. Here's what I will say. The investment in a new product line typically takes 9 to 12 months, right? You've got the idea, you've got to mix it and prototype it, then you've got to find manufacturing a supplier to make it for you, or maybe you make it on a home at home and you don't need to make it at scale until you have the demand. And then you need to find the market to buy that product from you. So that's a 9 to 12 month time period. Not that it isn't a good idea, but my sense is if you can find an initial growth engine that is a 3 month payback or a 6 month payback in terms of new clients, in terms of selling more of things that you have to existing clients, that is a better initial use for PocketSuite Capital until you have a bigger nest egg to be able to invest for a longer period of time. 9 to 12 months is a long time, and that's when everything works out for a totally new product line. So I would say hold off on the totally new product line until you have tested some other things that are maybe lower hanging fruit for you. What does the consultation look like with your pros? Oh, so the account health review is very straightforward. We have a configuration team that sits with you. Before they even sit down with you, they have looked at your numbers. They've run a bunch of different analysis on your numbers, and they've compared you to others that are operating at the top 10% of your industry. So we've done a lot of analysis to show here are pros that are operating in the top 10% are making 3 to 5x pros that are not. And so what are they doing that is different? Keeping everything equal, same number of team members, roughly same availability. What are they doing? So we've done that analysis and we're now comparing it against what you're doing. And we're starting to see the areas of opportunity, things you're not taking advantage of yet, or things that are happening that you haven't yet doubled down on that are really positive in your business that others are doubling down on in their own business. That's where we would look. And then we'd have a report for you that says, here are what we think the 3 to 5 biggest opportunity areas are, and here's why. So that we can then have a discussion with you that's live discussion about whether any of this is resonating and where you see the opportunities given this analysis. So it's a really positive way to have kind of an outsider look at your business and to be able to give you some benchmarks and then to be able to identify some core opportunities that you may not have seen. Okay. That may or may not result in you wanting to use financing. It might just be, hey, let me tweak these things in my business, in my account to be able to start taking advantage of it. So financing is not necessarily the end game for that kind of consultation. It may be an outcome, but it's not the end game. And then Sylvia, would you consider this capital a good idea for purchasing a new vehicle versus an auto loan? Now that's really interesting. The question there I would ask you is, how are you using that vehicle? If you're a mobile pet groomer and you're using it as, it's literally the place where you are doing the washing and the cutting of the hair and the styling for the pet, and you really have made the case that if you were not having people come to your homes and you were going to their homes, there are 30-40% more clients that would take you up on using your services. They just don't have the time because they work to drop their dog off and pick them up. But if you came to their place and wash the dog on their time, then they're in. This is something mobile detailers have found, having that bay where I have to come to you to do, to work on your car reduces the size of their market. When they come, into your driveway and wash your car and detail it and do all of the beautiful things, they get a lot more clients. So if you can make the case that additional vehicle expands your client base because you've got hard numbers that show that, then, I would say leasing a vehicle, making that purchase versus lease, calculation is the first thing to do. If you're someone who does pet boarding, and you really want to go pick up the dogs, right, to come to board with you or to train with you, and you need that vehicle for that purpose, and you can charge, to do those pickup services, and you can calculate how many pickups would I need to do per week to make the numbers work here, then absolutely. But not to get the vehicle because, it would, it's better transport than the vehicle you have, right? That the numbers don't work there. If you already have a vehicle that's serving that purpose and delivering, it's not don't, we're not getting a better ride, right? It's got to be adding something in terms of your offerings, in terms of your client base that makes the numbers work for you. Okay. And then it looks like Cash, in regards to keeping our equipment accessible so that we can be able to generate, pull, and analyze the numbers later, what is the best way to set up an equipment rental company in PS? Very, very good question. We have a whole resources feature that allows you to set up a resource group. So different types of equipment, you can put them in groups, and then you can put as many resources as you want in those groups, and you can set a capacity. Here's how many I can support on these days of the week at these times, so that you can track that, link those to the services. So every time those services are booked, you're tracking the utilization of that resource for that service. And then there's some beautiful reports that help you see the utilization. I know that's a lot. I want you to reach out to us in PocketSuite support. We'll help you get that set up. It's a resources feature, and it's gonna blow your mind in terms of really understanding what's being utilized. All right. So I hope I answered all those questions. We're almost at time here. I'm super excited about the engagement here, and I love the fact here's the best kept secret. So within the first 45 days of launching PocketSuite Capital, we've delivered $1 million to PocketSuite pros who are using that capital to grow their businesses. So we are very, very excited. But here's the dirty little secret that those dollars and the pros that we've delivered those funds to represent something like 6% of all the pros that are eligible for PocketSuite financing right now. So we are scratching the surface in terms of the amount of capital that is available to PocketSuite pros to be able to grow. And so what we want to do is to just help get the juices flowing about what your growth opportunities are so you can make an informed decision about that. That's what the whole purpose of this webinar has been. So I really appreciate you joining us to have this conversation and to ask these questions. This will not be the only time that we have to talk about what growth opportunities are available to you, and it will not be the only resource that PocketSuite's making available to help you drive forward on those growth opportunities. Thank you again for joining us, and stay tuned in terms of what's next. For those that are interested, please reach out and use that QR code for the account health review. You won't be disappointed whether you're interested in PocketSuite Capital or not. That account health review is a game changer. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. Thanks, Sylvia.